Have a blessed poya and welcome to our program Path to Freedom. And today as well we have a very interesting topic and we have our guest with us, Dr. Rupavahini, who is a former Sri Lankan diplomat. He is also the Director General of Tourism Authority and CEO Convention Bureau and is currently a senior lecturer for Edith Cowan University, Perth, and also the Australian College of Business and Technology. He also conducts meditation sessions for tourists after the launch of his publication, Pointers to Enlightenment, which was like 7 years ago. So today the topic will be pretty interesting. It will be on suffering and happiness taught in Buddhist teachings. Now we understand that topics of this nature has been discussed widely. So on Path to Freedom, we always make it a point to give our viewers the layman's point of view of these teachings. So we are honored to have you here with us once again, Dr. Rupavahini. Welcome to the program. So initially, let's start off with the key teaching of Buddhist philosophy. Let's enlighten our viewers about the key teaching of Buddhist philosophy.
Yes, the teachings of Lord Buddha, which we call Buddhist philosophy, can be broadly divided into two categories, namely mundane and supramundane. Mundane teachings are all about how one should lead life in a manner that it will be useful to the society and it will be helpful to the masses as a whole. Mundane teachings encompass various ways one could, like precepts, for instance, the precept that you need to observe, and also teachings like Brahma Viharana, loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity, that are essential in shaping one's life in a manner that it will not only be helpful to the individual who practices them, but also anyone who comes into contact with such a person. If you look at some of the sermons, such as Singalovada Sutra, Mangala Sutra, Parabhava Sutra, and these are all mundane teachings for those who would like to know how one could lead a life in the family, in your workplace, in the society, and so on. Now, supramundane teaching focuses on areas where there are spiritual seekers, the people who are into an investigation. They are studying various philosophies to understand what life is all about. They want to know the meaning of this life. They want to know where they have come from and where they will go after this. They want to know if there is any way that they could find some kind of inner peace.
So everyone's in search of happiness, isn't it?
Yes, but then how you interpret the terminology happiness, because if you are talking about inner peace, inner satisfaction, then essentially that is what the spiritual seekers are looking for. But if you use the word happiness, it has a wider description, like happiness from wealth, happiness from power, happiness
Depends on person to person as well.
Yes, but I was referring to the spiritual seekers who are into comparative religions and who are studying, who are practicing meditation, who are going from various one teacher to another, and then trying out various techniques and observing various traditions, and they are looking for something which they have not experienced before, and whom we call spiritual seekers.
The excitement as well.
Excitement, well, yes, again what happens is Now this is one of the mistakes that spiritual seekers make, because in search of the true nature of life and happiness, they have this in the back of their mind that there's some excitement that I have to experience. Once again, it's a perception. So just to answer your question, there are two types of people who would like to conduct their day-to-day life through various precepts and teachings of Buddhist philosophy that are very obvious in some of the sermons that I mentioned. But supramundane teachings are very subtle, and the language generally fails to express what it really means. So that's why the people are expected to make their own investigation and then compare it with their experience, and then see whether there is any reality to what they see through the supramundane teachings. And I can actually mention some of those sutras or sermons. Take Untitled Sutra, which says there is no self. And this has been interpreted by various people in different ways. But the fact remains, Untitled Sutra basically tells the audience, look at yourself, look at your body. Is it yours? Look at your feelings, sensations, emotions, and see whether you can find yourself in those. They come and go. And it's like, one spiritual leader said, your thoughts can come and go, but you are not a hotel, things like that.
It doesn't stay.
It doesn't stay. So things like this kind of subtle teachings really fall into the supramundane teachings. And that's where the spiritual seeker, if they are honest, if they are sincere with their efforts, they need to go into these teachings and investigate, analyze, and see whether they can have some kind of understanding and recognition with their own experience.
And one of the most fundamental teachings or base when it comes to Buddhist teachings is suffering. Can you elaborate on this?
Yes, this is a very heavy word taught in Buddhist philosophy. Now, the people, when you hear the word suffering or dukkha, they run miles. They don't want to hear it because it is usually...
That's not what people want.
That's not what people want. And the moment you hear the word suffering, they feel that it's something to do with negative aspect of life. But in fairness to Lord Buddha, who really, may I say, wanted to take the bull by the horn, it's the reality. And it's the very reason why Lord Buddha left all those pleasures and went in search of the various teachings to see whether he could find an end to this suffering. Now, what is really suffering? Suffering means unsatisfactoriness or unhappiness. If you look at suffering, there are again two aspects, because physical suffering,
mental suffering?
Yes. Now, physical suffering is, aging. I don't even have to elaborate physical suffering, which is fairly obvious, because your body is subject to aging process, and then with that comes various illnesses, ailments and aches and pains, or whatever you call. So physical suffering, it's undeniable. There's no need to elaborate. Everyone is subject to that. All human beings are subject to that. But psychological suffering is the part that this philosophy deals with effectively. When we say psychological suffering, you have better terms in modern days. You call it stress, you call it anxiety, you call it worries, even anger. When someone is angry, that person cannot possibly be happy.
And also expectations can cause to mental suffering as well.
Yes. So what Lord Buddha did was, is suffering. The next step was the cause of suffering. What are the causes of this suffering? And you go into in-depth analysis and you find what you mentioned is your expectation and tanha or attachment, and also your way of clinging on to things, which causes a lot of and also you're not here. It's always you have something better happening in the next moment, and that's why people are unhappy most of the time. You are not here. You are not happy right now. So it is always in the next moment, and that is why this suffering occurs. So it's a hard reality that the human beings are not willing to accept. So that's I mean a medical practitioner will tell a patient you have a terminal illness, and if the patient says sorry, I don't accept it, it's just too bad.
It's just too bad, yes. It's like understanding the reality.
Exactly. And also if you go into another a deep Supramanian teaching, Chullamalukya Sutra, where it says when someone is shot by an arrow, what would you do? Are you going to find out who shot this arrow, or what's the color of the distance, and what type of an arrow, how it is made of? No, he will run to the medical help, right? So similarly, you have got this lifetime, which is very short, although we think we have 40, 50, 60 years. That depends on the person. But in that lifetime, you go through immense suffering. But even when you look back, you realize that there have been so much of suffering one has gone through, except the process of release of that suffering. So this is what the Lord Buddha has discovered, and then he presented it as reality. So to that extent, I would say there's no harm, as I said before, taking the bull by the horn and let's deal with it.
Exactly, and let's just rectify, or rather like explain in a layman's point of view. If Buddhism embraces happiness,
you see, this is the part that is not really discussed in many places. At least Lord Buddha has also mentioned various types of happiness one could have. In Pali you call them Atti Sukha, Anana Sukha, Anavajja Sukha, and so on. If you look at this Anana Sutra, it is described the various types of happiness. Now Atti Sukha means having the ownership. Now take a simple example, someone living in his own house or living in a rented house. There is a difference,
yes.
Right? So this is not my place and this is my place. It's not, I mean, ownership means that, I'm free here in my own place, that kind of a happiness. And Anana Sukha, which is even greater, that is, you are not indebted to anyone. And see the happiness that you have. I'm not indebted to anyone, not even to a bank, in commercial sense.
You feel free.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise your entire life you're thinking, how do I pay my monthly installment, and then I might have a moratorium for because of this COVID, and then you still have to pay, probably with the same interest. It's suffering again. So Anavajja Sukha means, Anana Sukha means, then Anavajja Sukha means you also have gained this wealth through righteous means, in the sense you are blameless. You are not being cited as someone who has earned your wealth through various kind of other means that are not acceptable to society. And then Bhoga Sukha, which is also like you have this, whatever you have earned, with which you have certain amount of comfort. And that comfort also brings you certain happiness, which Lord Buddha has not denied. So these are some of the aspects that you need to look at when you speak about happiness. So Buddhist philosophy has never rejected the happiness that a layman can experience through what I just mentioned, Anavajja Sukha, Bhoga Sukha, Ananda Sukha, and so on. And these are also in the teachings.
And also, how do we perceive suffering and happiness in real life and also in terms of work life as well?
That's the question that a lot of people find it difficult to address. For instance, I would probably say if I'm asked that question, how do you this is the work-life balance. The very first thing is to acknowledge and accept this reality, and which means that you have these vicissitudes in life, ups and downs, and that is also described in one of the sutras called Loka Vipatti Sutra, and that says in your lifetime you need to go through these insult and praise, sadness, happiness, and also profits, losses, and that is described in this sutra, where Buddhist philosophy presents the true nature. So the first thing is to understand that the real nature, where you accept that. Because if you are not willing to accept that reality, then you are still in the same boat. You are not even making an attempt. Once it is acknowledged, once it is accepted, then the rest is easier. Half the battle is won. Nothing will come to you as a surprise. It's already accepted, and that's the beginning. And then, of course, you can either get into the mundane teachings and then lead a life which will not be a burden to another, or get into the supramundane teachings if you are a true, sincere, honest spiritual seeker.
And we've come towards the latter part of the program as well, Dr. Vanigasekara. So let's also highlight the fact that what you spoke to us today are the ideal situations. But why isn't it happening?
The ideal situation is what I attempted to say a little while ago, is what is taught in the universal teaching of Buddhist philosophy. That is, again, I think I mentioned that even before, is the sense of unknowability. A human being, although claims to be the most superior person on earth, and yet faces this unknowability in which anything could happen. So, to answer your question, why, although whatever the teachings that we undergo and whatever the teachings we follow, we still come across areas that are totally unanticipated. And that's precisely what the Dhamma spells out to the people. And basically, this is, it's a universal thinking. It is not individualistic thinking. It is more a collective way of looking at life and existence, which is taught in the Buddhist philosophy.
Thank you very much for enlightening us once again this Poya Day as well on suffering and happiness, which is taught in Buddhist teachings. Thank you so much for being a part of Path to Freedom, Doctor.
It's an honor to be here.
And with that, it's time for us to wind up Path to Freedom this Poya Day as well. Have yourself a blessed Poya. See you again on the next episode of Path.